Hey, this is Richie coming at you from the School of Marketing HQ. Before you dive into the show, I just want to tell you about a brand new short 12-week program we've launched called the Giants Marketing Masterclass. The program gives you access to insights and expert comments from over 25 CEOs and CMOs from major companies like Unilever, L'Oreal, M&S, Pret, and WPP, just to name a few. We focus on 6 key areas of marketing: customer, brand, commercial, creative, channel, and data and analytics. So if you were looking to upskill yourself or your team for just 2.5 hours each week and get access to a network with our industry's giants through our live sessions, do check out the School of Marketing website for more deets. Alrighty, for now, enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to another amazing Oh the Places We'll Go show with the fabulous Kerris Bright joining us today. Welcome, Kerris.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you. Now, this has been a while in the making, you busy lady, because you have been hard to pin down, and maybe that's our diaries as well. But anyway, I'm super delighted that this is where we are now. So fabulous to have you on the show. I'm going to do a bit of an intro. You probably don't need that much of an intro for many, but for some, they may not know the following. Kerris is Chief Customer Officer at the BBC for the last 5 years. Let me just pause on that. What a flipping amazing job that must be. But hard earned. You don't just land yourself into that job without some planning. So if I go back through Kerris's career, she did 10 years at Unilever, so that classical schooling that sets you up for a career in marketing. Then 9 years at AkzoNobel ICI Paints, and I have to say, Kerris was very generous in coming and talking to my leadership team a few years about some of her experiences, including how to truly embed purpose in a massive organisation with great results. So I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit of that. Also, global marketing, head of global marketing at BA. I mean, I'm just chalking them up here. CMO at Ideal Standard International, CMO at Virgin Media, also has been on the Marketing Society board, also chaired the marketing group of Great Britain. So, I mean, it doesn't get much more high profile than Kerris. Very commercial, worked on global super brands, worked in emerging markets, been in big turnarounds. And also, I think, just a very generous, direct, but generous and insightful person. So I think we're in for a smasher today, Richie. Lovely to have you on, Kerris.
Wow.
And, there you go.
Oh, Mark, thank you. Wow. I feel exhausted just hearing that. I'm reliving some of it, to be honest.
Well, this is what the show is all about. So why do we dive in? I mean, amongst all the things that Mark just said, the one thing that he didn't say was that you are actually a PhD. And how does that happen, going from that into the world of marketing? Maybe it's not such a leap, the neuroscience bit.
Well, look, this was not some great plan. I did a first degree in biology. I loved it, really enjoyed it, was attracted by life in academia, and I thought I would be an academic, actually. So I did a PhD because I thought that was what my career would be. And so I embarked on a PhD as a research scientist, molecular neuroscience. And I think first year in, I, at that point, clocked that it wasn't really the life for me. What I thought I would enjoy and would be good at, I was less than happy, it's fair to say. And so there were some aspects of the role that I enjoyed. I loved teaching. I didn't actually like doing the bench work, which is a bit of a problem if you're a research scientist, if I'm honest. I really wasn't that happy. And so I decided about 2 years in, I was not cut out for a life as an academic. I also decided I didn't want to walk away and have a 2 or 3 year failure, as I saw it then on my career. I wanted to get it done. I wanted to achieve something. So I kind of set my mind to getting it done. I wanted to have something to show for those 3 years, but it also gave me a bit of a drive to look for something else and in a way to start again. So I just went back and applied as graduates do for graduate jobs. I thought a bit about what I might be good at. Not that more switched on than most people are when they embark on their careers. I didn't have a particular vocation for business or for marketing. I thought it would be interesting. I thought I'd be a good communicator. I enjoyed communications. I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed shopping. Thought advertising was interesting. And so I just started to apply for jobs, and I applied for a number of graduate jobs because I felt I needed to start. In a way, the overwhelming feeling was starting again and starting scratch. And so I just started and applied for graduate jobs, and I had a couple of offers, banks, other businesses. And I applied for Unilever. I knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who worked at Unilever, thought it was a good organisation. I was interested in marketing back in the day, talking over 30 years ago now. If you're interested in marketing, Unilever is a good place to start. And I was lucky enough to get accepted onto their graduate program. So I just wanted a job, frankly. I kind of wanted to start again. That's how it felt like to me at the time, or get started onto what I thought would be more of a career track, having felt like making a full start, as it felt like at the time, because that's what it felt like. It felt like I tried something, it wasn't cut out for it, albeit I did get it. I've got a PhD, did it in 3 years, which is also, as I now realise, is quite something. But a lot of that was because I knew I had the drive to do something else. I wanted to get it finished. So it was not a great plan. It just is what it is. And I then started again with Unilever. And it's great to reflect back and think, because I'm sure you'll ask me questions. Well, what did I learn? Has it stood me in good stead? All of those things. And I can reflect on it now in hindsight and see some of those things. At the time, genuinely, I felt, tried that, have done it, but it's not what I want to do. It's not me. I will try something else. And so I started working as a graduate on the UCMDS scheme, for any of those that remember it, with Unilever over 30 years ago.
Right there, Kerris, is already a really big life lesson in terms of, you said you weren't happy, but you needed to get it done, to draw a line on it and having something to show. And I think it's a great example of make sure you're running to something rather than from something. Then you talk about starting again. And I am going to ask the obvious question, what did you learn from that process of having to do a complete reappraisal? And as you say, start again or get started. There must be some important learnings in there which have shaped everything thereafter.
I think it's tough to, when you reflect back. What at the time I really felt like I was starting afresh on something and didn't really think about building on what the last three bit years had brought for me. But I think it was a tough time personally for me during that time, but I got through it and I achieved it and I had something at the end of it. And as I reflect on, is a bit of a characteristic of me, is that I've got quite a lot of drive, I've got quite a lot of resilience. I think it taught me that you can get through stuff, you can get the other side, you can build on something. If I look back, it's probably one of the greatest learning experiences of my life, is that you can, just because you've started on something doesn't mean that is going to set the direction forever. It just is one thing that you've done. And I achieved something. I probably learned about resilience, personal resilience, personal independence, quite a lot about drive. Most people, I think, at the point where I was, chose to just give up and get out. And I think I just strongly felt I wanted to have something to reflect back on. I wanted a personal achievement. I wanted to have achieved something. And I'm very proud that I've got a PhD and achieved it. But I know how tough that was. So I guess it proved to me that deep down I'm quite strong. I've got some resilience there. That stood me in good stead for other times when things just haven't quite worked out the way I had hoped. And I think that's a great lesson for me, is that, there are other points in my career, things just don't always go to plan. You have an idea, have a plan, you hope for something to work out. It doesn't always work out that way. But as you say, Mark, then you move on. Don't worry too much, think about what you've learned and move on. And it doesn't always work out. But when I reflect back, something my partner said to me when I was first talking about my first experience of the BBC and what it was like when I was first there. And he said to me, if you think about it, it sounds like everything you did in your career was getting you ready for this moment, because some of it was about how to work with certain people, how to start in new businesses, some of the challenges I was facing. And he was like, yeah, but if you had done all of those things, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing now. So in many respects, it feels like they're just building blocks and stepping stones along the way. They don't always feel like that. But that's the way I'm starting to see it. It was like you try something, you build on it. But it doesn't always work out the way you plan. And so just, okay, think again, pick yourself up, or look around you again and say, right, what have I now learned about why that wasn't such a great situation, or didn't quite work out for me, or timing wasn't right? What have I learned? And just kind of move on.
So, Kerris, you've already, named so many great nuggets around some of the, the things that have led you to this point and the success that you have had. If there was a way to sort of package it up into a little sort of summary of nutshell as to what you think is your secret sauce, what do you think it would be?
God, I think and some of it stems back to why I actually was a scientist in the first place. I'm pretty curious. I'm curious about things. I'm curious about people. So I like exploring ideas. I like understanding about situations and about people that find themselves in situations. So I think being curious and having some curiosity about how businesses work, about how things could be different, about how, as I say, how things work, how the world works, but also how people work and what people's motivations are. And I'm curious about all of those aspects. And I think, so for me, I think that is one aspect of me. I would say I'm a pretty curious person. I'm interested in things. I'm interested in people. I'm quite good at building relationships with people. I think come with that because I'm genuinely interested. I strive to create understanding out of things. So I'm often striving to resolve things, to try and create certainty out of ambiguity, or to think about how to solve a problem. So I'm often striving to find solutions to things. And so I think that analytical side of me, the problem solving side of me, probably relates back to why I actually was quite a good, decent scientist. I just didn't really love it. I'm often strive to solve and resolve and problem solve things. So I think I'm a problem solver. I like to create clarity out of ambiguity. I like to think about, right, what does this tell me? Where do I think I can go forwards with an idea or with something? So clarity of purpose, clarity of thinking. I would say curiosity, clarity are things that kind of probably define me. I think I think I am, what I love about the world of marketing in its broadest sense is I am neither an artist or a scientist. I'm not that creative. I'm also not that deeply analytical that I can live on either end of that spectrum. But I think I live really well in the middle of that spectrum, and am sufficiently able to navigate the left brain and the right brain, the art, the science, the magic, the logic. And I think that's why I enjoyed the world of business and marketing, because it is very much about analysis and ideas, the balance of problem solving plus creativity. And I think that is just part of my psychological makeup. I often felt I was never creative enough to be really creative, or analytical enough to be a really good scientist. And probably the fact that I'm somewhere in the middle but can span those worlds well is ultimately probably the thing that has maybe meant that I can live in this crazy world of marketing and survive for over 30 years.
More than survive. All the C's, curious.
It's not a nutshell, Richie. It's not a nutshell, I'm sorry.
But
it was really good. Thank you.
But all the C's, curious, certainty, clarity of purpose. on clarity of purpose, I'm going to jump right in. So you gave that great gift to me and the leadership team back in the day, and described how you found purpose in paint. So tell us more about that journey, the impact it had, because it was really ahead of the bulk of the purpose conversation as we've had in the last few years. You know, Unilever doing their back and forth. But tell us a little bit about what you curated back at AkzoNobel.
So it's a very interesting, it's a massive learning experience for me, actually. I was a global CMO for ICI Paint at the time. Dulux was the big brand we were wanting to build. And we were working with actually a very purpose-led idea. We didn't probably describe it in those words then, but we were wanting to really drive growth in the category, really connect audiences with paint and with colour in a way that they hadn't, so that we could really ignite growth in the category. And we've been working on a really, we thought, powerful idea for the brand that was based on a really powerful insight that was that actually colour can really change your world. That if you can change your walls, you can actually change how you feel about the world. So it's got a deep psychological benefit. And so this idea was all about how we could tap into the fact that if you change walls, you can change worlds, that colour can actually add life and create life. And so we'd worked on, I thought, really interesting, powerful idea for the brand that we were starting to explore through innovation, but particularly communication, that was really connecting with audiences. And we were starting to see some really early results. And I was feeling pretty satisfied, I guess, with myself and the team on how we were really cracking a great brand idea for the outside world. But the real learning for me was when I took it to the new CEO that joined the organisation, and really it was Tex Gunning, who was I think the pioneer. He was ex-Unilever, but a pioneer before Paul Polman in the days of purposeless brands. Because when I talked about this idea, he saw it in a completely different way, in that his challenge was bringing together two organisations that one had acquired the other. AkzoNobel had acquired ICA, and he was trying to create a new culture and a new sense of purpose inside the organisation, coming from an organisation that had come from very different places that clearly was not gelling. So he was seeing this idea not as a great way of driving customer growth, which is what I was focused on the outside. He could see it as a great way in which he could build alignment and build the brand inside the organisation. He absolutely really understood the power of a personal idea to really not just ignite and excite customers, but to really ignite the spirit inside the organisation. So he was seeing it in a completely different way than I had seen it. And so he taught me that actually, if you've got a genuinely powerful idea that's competitive and relevant, but also true to the organisation and the D of an organisation, which is my measure of a great idea, competitive, relevant and true. If you can actually have that, that is most powerful when used to mobilise inside the organisation and galvanise people around a common purpose, a common set of ideas. And so that was a pivotal moment for me to think, actually, my purpose as a leader was not just to grow the business with customers, with audiences, but actually to grow the organisation inside and to mobilise and ignite the spirit inside an organisation. And that together we went on this journey of engaging the organisation inside to build the brand as well as outside. And that was just, I'd never thought about things in that way before. This goes back like almost 2 decades. I really thought my job is to grow the business with customers. And not just, but one of the best ways you can do that is to connect the organisation deeply inside to why it exists, what it's there to achieve. And that ultimately is going to allow you to grow inside, but also to grow with customers in a much more powerful way. And he taught me that. And I then subsequently I took roles such as the one at British Airways to try and bring purpose and build brands inside, and to help an organisation that I felt had lost its way with customers, but was lacking confidence inside. And so the work that I did at British Airways on To Fly to Serve was actually about an idea about helping the organisation get its mojo back inside at a time of strikes and ash clouds and a bit of lacking confidence inside that organisation. So Yeah, Mark, you remind me that piece, that time at ICI Axonabel with Tex on purpose inside the organisation was pretty pivotal, and I've tried to build on that and learn from that in many of the roles that I've subsequently done.
I mean, what a wonderful reframe and an actually expansive sort of remit of what marketers are now here to do. It's not just about the growth agenda, but it's about the galvanizing of the organization too, changing culture, transformation. I mean, it doesn't, it really positions us and our function at the center of of the firepower that we can bring in the center of the organization. And I'm going to perhaps maybe turn to your current organization at the BBC, and just sort of wonder. I mean, it seems like a marvelous organization, and I'd love to get a bit from the inside as to what's it like on the ground.
It's a wonderful, unique organization that is uniquely challenging and uniquely exciting. And as I say to most people, it's the best job in the world and it's the worst job in the world. There is nothing straightforward or average or vanilla about life at the BBC. It's at the centre of culture inside the UK. It's got real influence globally. It has forces on it, whether it's from regulation or politics or government, or it's such a high-profile organisation that is often the thing that others choose to read and write about, that can be quite challenging when you're on the inside. So it's a uniquely challenging organisation to work within, but it's also fantastically inspiring and interesting. We've just been working over the last couple of years on actually how to create an idea for the BBC brand that can, again, really connect, in particular UK audiences, back into what is unique about the BBC, which is not that we do amazing entertainment content or great news or good education, the what we do, inform, educate and entertain. We're just a little bit taken for granted to a degree because we're so prevalent in much of people's lives, but they don't realise the relationship they have with the BBC, but also don't probably recognise that the massive thing that's unique about us and that really drives us is we are a purpose-driven organisation because we only exist for public purpose. We don't exist to make profit. We have to create value for all audiences. That's a little soundbite that I created for the organisation. It's like we have to create value for all. We exist for all UK audiences, and that's quite a unique and special thing. And so we're trying to work out how could we, in particular, remind audiences or just create more of an awareness of audiences in the UK about why we exist. And so we created this idea about this is our BBC, which is the audience's BBC, that we exist for all of us. It's not just for some of us that can afford it. It's actually for all of us. And we exist, everyone needs to pay, and everyone should and needs to get something out of the BBC. It's quite a special role that we have. So we created this idea, this is our BBC, and started to think about how we could, through communication in particular, bring it to life. And so we told a story, we call it Shared Stories, which is tries to tell the story of the BBC through clips. You might have seen it where we put together lots of different clips that talk about the fact that it's a unique idea, it's a special idea. It doesn't have to exist. It only exists if we all believe in it, and that it creates a common ground, and it's here for all of us. But it's done in an incredibly entertaining way, using all of the joy in the clips from the BBC. And it's really started to connect with audiences. They start to think a bit differently about, yes, I do see that the BBC is a little different. But as we were just saying, one of the most powerful things it's done is suddenly people think, yes, we can start to tell our story. We've found a way of telling a story to audiences that helps everyone inside the organisation feel really motivated and a bit more confident about why we exist, that we can stay as relevant, but be different in the next 100 years as we have in the past 100 years. So we're trying to use it to build a bit of confidence inside the organisation. And the second piece of work that we did to try and tell the power of our journalism, and to try and lift the lid on our journalism, what makes our journalism different. And behind the idea is, if you see how it's made, then you can trust it. If you know how it's made, you can trust what we say. And it tries to lift the lid on something quite dry, which is the editorial guidelines that guide the whole of the BBC. We have these very clear guidelines about how we work. And if people understand those guidelines, if they see how we make things and why we make things, they can trust what we say. And it talks about trust is earned. And it's actually, I mean, it's a bit old school, but it's an incredible piece of film that tells the story of our journalism. It talks about journalism and through the lens of what we've been doing in Ukraine recently. And my God, it's powerful. Whenever I see it, I get kind of goosebumps, as do audiences. But critically, for our news organisation, that can be a challenging place to work. The energy that it kind of creates inside that organisation behind a sense of common purpose, that what they do is unique and special and distinctive, and that we can help them tell the story of that to the outside world. Again, that sort of brand storytelling has created as much energy inside the BBC, I think, as it has outside the BBC, making, hopefully, my job, making our journalists feel really, really proud to work as part of the organisation and to keep up the endeavour of the pursuit of truth. So again, sort of brand ideas, marketing ideas, creative ideas to connect with audiences, but really starting to see the power of them to ignite an organisation behind a common sense of purpose.
When you talk about these amazing achievements, Kerris, you're talking about the highest order of marketing, about direction for an organisation. And you've used the word confidence quite a lot. And I think that's a confident marketing function is trusted to lead an organisation. So I'm going to just try and extrapolate a bit. You've done a few side projects. You've been on the Marketing Society board, chaired MGGB. I'm sure you've done many other things. Has that been part of your confidence build in yourself personally, to show that you can nail it in other environments? What role has side projects played if it's not about building that confidence?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think so. Being on the board of the Marketing Society, a great and wonderful thing that it is. The drive there was to actually be part of a community, of a network of really, really powerful people. There's a wonderful set of people on that board, and I get a lot of energy from talking with peers and working with peers. But it generally was to try and contribute a bit more. I felt that I perhaps was contributing in quite a narrow way to the organisations I was working for, and I was asked to contribute. I wasn't sure if I could, but I thought we'll give it a try, and massively enjoyed it. They had to drag me away. I think I was on the board about 7 years and way overstayed my welcome. But I really enjoyed being part of that group, being part of that peer network, and trying to contribute to helping the function more fully. Being the chair of the Marketing Group of Great Britain, that was something a little different. I was on the council, again, because I love being part of that group and I wanted to contribute. And I hadn't quite clocked early on that if you're on the council, at some point, someone's going to come tap you on the shoulder and say, well, we're looking for a chair or a president. Would you like to do it? I kind of thought, I'll just be part of this group. And then you suddenly realise, no, at some point, it's a narrow pool of people that they're going to call to be chair. And I was asked, I said no a few times because I didn't feel I had the capacity to do it. That's what I said. I think I was also terrified about standing up in front of that room full of peers and putting yourself out. Absolutely terrified about doing it. So I think my excuses early on were I haven't got time, just started at the BBC. And that was true. I also was pretty terrified. And then I made the mistake of I was on holiday and I'd just been running up and down some hills in Cornwall, was rush of adrenaline, feeling pretty good and confident in the world, listening to some podcast about self-fulfillment or something, I don't know, and thinking, yes, I can take on the world. And I remember in that moment just sending a text saying to the chair at the time, okay, yes, I will be the next chair. Get out of your comfort zone, put yourself out there. Did that, immediately regret it. The adrenaline goes down. You suddenly realise what you've done, and I sort of immediately thought, why have I done that? It's a host of pain because I was really scared about putting myself out there, to be honest. So that was really about personal comfort zone, Mark. So that probably, I think that was about, was I up to it? Could I do it? Having seen others do it before me, everyone said I should do it. I would enjoy it, which is what I now say to other people that were trying to ask to do it. But that was, yes, you're probably right. It was, for me, I saw that as a personal challenge of could I do that? Could I make a contribution? Having seen others do it and do it so brilliantly. And yeah, that was about, it was in a moment of weakness. I think in most of my rational daily life, I would have continued to say, I'm far too busy, I don't have time. And I was in a moment of weakness, signed up.
That's been a
But how wonderful.
podcast.
How wonderful an opportunity. Well, yeah, and it's I guess it's in those moments where we put ourselves out there where truly extraordinary things can happen. And I guess it's kind of getting ourselves, perhaps every now and again, into that uncomfortable zone to make us truly come out and stand above the parapet, I guess.
I mean, I think I've been mentoring some young marketers, I think I was talking to someone about how you can expand your comfort zone if you don't get out of your comfort zone. And you start to think, it's interesting when you're mentoring, you think, oh, this is a great pearl of wisdom. Am I actually applying that to myself? And I think it was a moment of thinking, what are you now doing to test yourself and challenge yourself and expand your comfort zone? But I was feeling particularly good on that sunny April morning, I think, in Cornwall, when the endorphins were high from having run a bit. It was a moment of weakness, but otherwise I don't think I would have said yes to it. I don't think.
Hey, quite amazing, and I know the MGGB be grateful for that, for you saying yes in that heat of the moment. But Kerris, I want to turn the conversation to something else that you said earlier on in the episode, where you talked about your love for teaching, and that was probably one of the things you enjoyed most during your PhD. And I guess I wonder what role could teaching either have played in your successes, and maybe not formal teaching, but just the ability to pass on knowledge, and perhaps what do you think it's going to play in your later career as well?
I don't know, and I think it's interesting, teaching versus coaching, right? And mentoring versus coaching. At one point, I thought I would more actively pursue, this goes back some years, more of a leadership development aspect to my role, and might do that more independently of a full-time executive role. And I really got excited by coaching and practicing being a coach and learning about the practice of coaching. But I got probably more excited about it when I started to read about a leader as a coach, because that felt like a better fit for me at that moment in my career. And that's probably still where I am, which is I'm really, really enjoying I like being part of something. I like being part of an organisation. If you look at my career, you must like institutions, right? Or big organisations, because I quite like being part of that. I like being part of something. But I am as interested in how I can help lift and inspire others or teams, and be more of a leader as a coach. And so that's what my focus is, I think, right now, is trying to practice that muscle a little bit more of being a leader, but being a leader that does that through coaching my team or through coaching others, trying to ask better questions than having answers these days. So I think that's where it's not so much teaching, but it's more asking others questions and helping others think things through, and coaching, I guess, in a corporate setting. But I do still enjoy being part of something and trying to help an organisation thrive and helping to grow an organisation such as the BBC. But I think being with groups of people, my own team or other teams, small groups of people, and getting the energy from seeing that group of people grow, share, have ideas. I think that's probably, as I reflect back, where I get quite a lot of my energy from. And that's probably where I got a lot of the energy from the teaching side in the earlier part of my career, because being a bench scientist is a pretty lonely life. And that's probably why I wasn't very good at it. It's quite solitary. And I'm not that extrovert. I'm quite introverted, but I do need and get energy from working with teams and working with groups of people. And I think that whether that's a teacher or a coach, is probably quite an interesting space for me, I think. And that's where I sort of probably thrive and should focus on that a bit more. This is interesting. These things always make you reflect, don't they?
Well, this is it. You know,
really cool.
We're all a product of our past. We came across this really interesting question a little while ago, which is, what's your favourite mistake and what did you learn from it? And we asked John Amici that, and he had to pause for a while and came up with a brilliant answer. I think you've already given one example. You talk about it as a moment of weakness, doing MGGB chair. But can you think of another example where you've made a really brilliant mistake?
I don't think I can think of like a massive mistake. I just make lots of them, like lots of mistakes on a kind of slight misjudgments, mistakes. The biggest mistakes I've probably made have been about people. And I have seen some people go on to do extraordinary things that I didn't always see that in them. And it's made me think a bit about, what did I miss? Did I give enough space? Did I see that person in the right way? Was I too closed? Maybe they actually found a different environment in which they were able to flourish. Maybe I did see what I needed to see. But I think if I reflect back, the bigger mistakes I think I've made, or where I've missed opportunities, is when you probably are too slow about making decisions about people, too slow about what you need in your team. But also, I think, as I say, I look back and think I was wrong or did not see at a moment the potential in someone that I have now seen them realise. And you feel wonderful and thrilled for the people, but it's made me reflect a little bit about what was closed about me that I didn't see that. That's where I think I've probably, if I reflect back, if I think of mistakes, is probably, you never know it's a mistake, because I don't know whether if I'd given some more opportunity it would have worked out better. I don't know. But if I think about choices I've made that probably haven't always been optimal, they are often about people. The other thing I've learned, the one thing I learned quite early on, I've made some mistakes on some great, it's my life has not been about marketing communications, but some of the mistakes have been about campaigns that have not been that great, right? And I think mistakes about not being brave enough, being too cautious early on. But also the one thing I've learned, and I do put this into practice now, you often know at the start something's not quite right. And if you don't solve it at the start, you never resolve it at the end. been too many times I've experienced where I kind of think in my gut, I'm not quite sure if we're going in the right direction, or the way someone's saying, I understand, but don't worry, we'll solve it in this way, or we'll solve it at that stage in the process. More of my learning is, if your gut is telling you there's a bit of a problem with something, there probably is. And I probably could, when I've made mistakes, I could have leaned much more into my gut sense or experience, whatever it is, about that something wasn't quite right, or had risk of not going in the right direction, of not being as good, not connecting. And it nearly always ended up not being solved. And so I now often say to my teams, if you're not sure, if you haven't resolved it, don't move on until you're really, really sure, because you probably won't solve it at the end. And you're probably going to be sat at the end thinking, yeah, that still didn't quite work out. We still didn't quite connect. It's a tough lesson to learn, tough to put into practice. But that's one thing I would say is, when I've made mistakes, is because I've let things go and not listened to my gut or my experience or my judgment, because I've been persuaded by others that it will be solved, and it hardly ever is.
Wow. Kerris, what two wonderful nuggets right there. And I really just have to applaud you for your candor on the first one. I mean, it's actually a pretty hard thing to talk about, the thought about that missed opportunity, particularly when it comes to people. And then, what does that then mean and reflect on your own judgment? It's something that we all do. And I think all of us should actually, be much more mindful about, when we do have those tough people decisions to make, and how that sort of comes across and how we then reflect on them. So it's wonderful to hear you say that. So thank you. And I look, we're literally out on this segment here, but I'm going to pitch in one last question. And that is all around the future of for you, Kerris. I mean, you gave us a few nuggets about potentially direction and all the like. But I mean, what would you want your legacy to be at the end of, perhaps whenever it might be? What would you like your legacy to be?
Oh, that's a great question. I would love to think that businesses or brands or teams that I've worked with have felt that I've ultimately just left them in a better place than when I started. That I want businesses to grow. I want people to grow. I want to feel that I've helped things get to a better place than when I started on that journey with an organisation or with a team. And I think just to feel that a business has grown faster or grown in a different way, that people have felt better about the business, that I might have created some excitement and optimism and confidence about a business, but that people think that they are better as a result of having been part of a group that I've led. If all the teams that I've worked with could feel that was their experience, then I would say that would have been a professional life worth living. I'm not going to be Steve Jobs when I often reflect and think, what about that man's contribution to the world in terms of how it's driven all of our behaviour and what the creation of iPhones and iPods have done for us. I sort of think that probably is not my mark in the world. I'm not the great innovator, shaper of markets or businesses. But hopefully I can come in, pick something up, lift it, elevate it, be uplifting. If I can do that with the teams and the people that I'm working with, and they feel better as a result of time spent with me, then that would be hopefully something that I would feel good about.
How wonderful. Thank you for that answer, Kerris.
That sense of custodianship, leaving things in a better place. It reminds me of New Zealand rugby, where they say that the most important thing is to leave the shirt in a better place than you found it. Kerris, it's been a wonderful a wonderful experience to hear about your life's journey and some of the key things. Let me do my best to play some of those things back. So it wasn't a great plan you suggested at the beginning, and you pivoted from doing something that wasn't making you happy, but you got it done and started again. And the lesson there that you can get to the other side. It requires resilience, independence, and drive, but you can get there. And these things become our building blocks. We talked about purpose and talking about really high order stuff, igniting confidence and pride and spirit in paint and in other things as well. Who'd have thought? You also talked very explicitly about it was a moment of weakness that took you to the MGGB. But in the end, not really. I think actually a moment of strength and bravery to have a conviction, to test yourself, challenge yourself. Many things that we can take from that. You talk very vividly about mistakes, as Richie said, very honest. And that it's a hard thing to talk about, but of course it's the reality that we're all fragile, we all make mistakes, none of us are perfect. And then the solve it at the beginning, I loved as well. It reminds me of we know a painter who sometimes it doesn't cook quite well, and his wife has permission to take a razor blade through his paintings if it's looking like it's, because you're never going to fix it later on. And he can't do it himself, so his wife has that permission. So it's been lovely. When you talked about your secret sauce, you talked about the C's, curious, certainty and clarity. I actually think what's emerged out of this is the H's, which is you've shown tremendous honesty. You've talked about the highest order things in terms of the purpose and the spirit and the confidence of an organization. And you've also been very humble in terms of admitting that some of the things that didn't go brilliantly when it wasn't perfect, when you weren't happy. And so I think you've brought a really genuine sense to this conversation. And so thank you, Kerris. It's been an absolute treat to hear your story and your path.
Inviting me, and yeah.